I should be everybody. I'm hoping that it's going through here. I want to do it live because it's easier for me actually. Anyway, so I want to talk today about what it means to live through the heart. This is an extremely important topic, and let me just make sure that the audio is okay. Audio is okay. Okay, it is. All right. So, what does it mean to live through the heart? Living through the heart has two really important meanings. And the first I want to talk about has to do with what most people would probably assume. And this has to do with love, which is extremely important, obviously. But living through the heart is really about embodying the frequency of love. And this meaning of it has to do especially with opening up whenever you experience a block or a trigger. Okay, and this takes a lot of practice, but essentially what this means is it's a way of living with other humans, especially. So when something out there in the world really gets to you and bothers you, instead of going into stories about what it means and telling yourself you have all the answers, what you do rather than that is you open yourself up to the experience. And in a way, it's popping out of the confines of whatever story you're currently in. So if it has to do with an argument with a spouse or a partner, it would be about stepping outside of that and saying, no matter what happens right now, I need to embody love of myself and the other person. It doesn't mean you take any particular point of view in the argument. It doesn't mean you say, I don't need to argue for anything. I don't need to fight for anything. It doesn't mean that everything in the relationship is all of a sudden perfect. It just means that as an undercurrent to whatever's going on, I remember what really matters, which is love. And love has to be the foundation and the bedrock of every situation I'm in. So it's like saying there is no situation. This reflection is kind of bothering me, but I keep wondering, like, what is that? It's about saying there is no situation that is exempt from a foundational love. And that's very important because if you don't do that, you get stuck in narratives, you get stuck in stories, and you tell yourself, um, well, you actually stop telling yourself anything. You get in a discussion with your partner or a friend, or something really bothers you, that you're maybe something to do with your work really bothers you, or something you see on the news really triggers you, and you say, oh wow, people are so stupid, how can they actually believe that? Or you maybe you're just in a terrible mood and you walk around like bah humbug and you pissed off at everybody. Whatever the situation is, you say that there's no um, there's always a love underneath this. There's always a love supporting this, and so it's like love becomes the blanket that surrounds everything. And when you do that, it doesn't mean that you're going to reach perfect clarity or perfect purity right away. But what it means is it's almost like setting your sights on on a certain star to guide by, like the pole star. And what it does is it says, okay, you're telling the various levels of your multidimensional being, from yourself to your higher self, you're saying, I know that at the end of the day, I need to get back to love. And it doesn't mean you're going to, like I said, it doesn't mean you're going to get there instantly, but it means that you know that that's what matters most of all. Okay. So it's essentially setting a level of an intention to say, my intention is to interact lovingly with the world, with other people, with myself, with nature, with plants, with animals, with inanimate objects, to be patient, to be loving, to be everything. And then on top of that, you allow yourself to ride the wave of whatever you're going through. Allow yourself to be triggered as much as it might suck. Allow yourself to be really bothered and annoyed. Allow yourself to feel inadequate and to feel shame and to feel anger if these are things that are coming up. I'm not saying to suppress them at all, but to understand at the same time, this is happening within a container of love itself. And when you do that, it's basically like pushing the fast forward button on whatever you're going through. It doesn't mean you're going to get through it immediately, but it means that because you have that destination point of being able to integrate this experience with a loving capacity, it means that you're going to get there sooner because you actually know where you're going. Otherwise, you can just end up going in circles. So, this is the very, very important aspect of living in your heart that involves living through love and being a loving being. Okay. I want to talk about the second one too. The second one is, what does it mean to live through your heart? Living through your heart means, and this one is where it gets almost literal, because you're talking about the heart chakra, which is in the center of the chest, okay, as we know, and blossoming out as, um, depending on which tradition you look at. Well, if you think about Venus, I believe it's a lotus or a flower with 12 petals, but I'm thinking of that number 12 now. So we can say that this has a 12 vibration somehow. Anyway, it's a very complete energy when it's functioning well. And the heart chakra is the chakra, of course, related to love. But we also have to acknowledge on the downside, it's the chakra related to wounding of our capacity to love. Okay. And it actually lodges in the fibers of the body, in the molecular structure, and in the cellular memory. And this applies to your current life very powerfully, whatever traumas you've suffered, and it applies to past lives, and it all gets embedded in the mesh of the heart chakra and its denser layers, which would be the actual layers in the tissues of the human body. So what would that mean, living in your heart, in that case? Well, this is where it gets, it's funny because, in a sense, this first definition I gave of living in your heart, which is a little bit more up in the sky because it's like love as an emotion. So it's less tangible, right? You're dealing with in the emotion of love. And yet at the end of the day, it's actually easier to grasp that, I think, for a lot of people because it's sort of more in the ether. We talk about love, we talk about the heart as being associated with love. So most people from society, even if they're not terribly spiritual, they're going to understand that living in the heart might have to do with feeling love. The reason why this second definition is more complex, kind of, is because it's all these subterranean, gritty layers of meaning that have to do with the way in which pain, wounding, and trauma gets into the human vessel. So if you're living in your heart from that standpoint, it means that you feel what you're feeling and you understand that each time you literally feel a heat, an uncomfortable warmth, even a stabbing pain that's coming from an emotional aspect of whatever you're going through and whatever you're being triggered by. Um, when you literally, I'm talking about literally a sensation in your heart area. Um, this is something to pay attention to, and you listen to that rather than listening to and putting your focus on the mental picture. And there's a few elements here. One of the first things to do, and this has to do with honestly philosophical and meditative practices, is simply to understand that the I, the observer, is not the mental story. If you're not familiar with that, there's a lot of both traditional and more contemporary sources of information. I really like, oh God, what's it called? Sometimes I'm bad with the titles of things, but it's like The Untethered Mind by, I think it's Michael. Um, The Untethered Soul by Alan Singer. Um, this book was helpful to me. I actually listened to the audiobook. I went through a period just of a couple weeks, actually. It was very quick, where I was really into this book. And then I kind of passed through it, not because I don't agree with it anymore, but because I needed to explore other things. But I will say that there are certain threads within that story that to me are kind of incomplete, but that's neither here nor there. I think that one of the most valuable things is simply understanding that the I, the observer, which is your mental focus, which we shouldn't even use the word mental, but I'll use the word consciousness focus, the kind of center of your consciousness is not the same thing as a mental story. And this takes practice. And I'm not going to get into a super long explanation of this, but it's very important. Whether you've been working on spirituality and working on yourself for a while, or whether you've just started, it's very important to be able to tell where your consciousness is placed. Okay. I'm not saying that you should be a master of, this is very Zen Buddhism, to to focus on the willpower of where you place that focus of consciousness. I'm not saying that you should be doing that 24/7, like all the time. But what I am saying is that simply understand that there is a focus of the observer that might be on a mental story, it might be on an emotion that's happening, it might be on physicality, it might be observing nature around you, or it might be somewhere else. But it's possible to see where that focus is placed, okay? And it's as simple as saying, what am I looking at? What are my thoughts like right now? What am I paying attention to? What am I feeling? It's these questions that remind you that you actually have a focus that can travel, all right? So going back to the heart, then, your focus can go to a mental picture or a mental story, a narrative, an idea, a complaint, a problem, a belief system. I'm no good. I can't do this. That person's an asshole. That person pisses me off. I love them so much it hurts. I'm really busy today. I'm really tired. Uh, I wish I had more money. Whatever your thing is that's happening right now. Okay, those are very mental things though, these concepts that I was just listing. They're very mental, they're belief systems, and they're pretty much always going to be accompanied by literally words, okay? The words of the inner monologue that you hear in your head that are thoughts that run and run and run like a train. All right? And then there's the physicality of literally what am I feeling in the heart chakra area of my body, in my center? What am I feeling there? Okay? So this is coming back to this. This is where we notice something else about being triggered, which is that there's pretty much always two things that happen at the same time. If it's what I would refer to as a genuine, if it really is a trigger, meaning it's an area of emotional stuckness, something that's bothering you that you can't just flow through, something that's halting your progress from 1 minute to another in the course of your day. If it really is that kind of a trigger, which is going to be going back to some kind of a trauma or a dysregulation of the nervous system, um, if it's a genuine trigger like that, then there is going to be, well, there's a myriad of components, but the biggest components are going to be kind of physical and mental. So this is what I'm saying. It's actually, you're going to feel heat, stabbing, uncomfortable warmth, um, tingling that's weird, tension, stress built up somewhere on your body, usually along the chakra line. You're going to feel that. At the same time, the mental picture is just going to go off, boom. And it's crazy how this happens. And this can happen for years and years and years. It's basically how most people live. They're triggered by countless things throughout the day to some degree, whether it's a very serious trigger to the point that we would call it almost like a PTSD attack, or whether it's a much more nuanced trigger that a person might. I mean, if a trigger is really nuanced, the person's probably dissociating from it, and that's why they perceive it as being nuanced. If something again is a genuine trigger, it actually is quite important, and it's a good thing to look into it and try to identify the source. But if you're dissociating from that, unfortunately, you're in a well. It's fortunate because it's a survival tool, so it helps you to just literally get through your day. But the downside to that is it makes it much harder for you to even see what's going on. That's a whole other talk about dissociation. But the dissociative triggers, or the triggers we dissociate from, are the ones that are very easy to continue for decades, and you literally won't even know that it's there. It takes a very high level of persistence and patience with with our own self observation in order to even see that we are dissociating from something and that something's going on. The way I describe that is it's like having a road with lots of potholes. The potholes representing the things that trigger us and cause some kind of a post traumatic event. Um, Dissociation is like when those potholes are filled in but not really fixed ultimately. They're just filled in with some more cement. So, a car can travel over those potholes, and instead of going like gudunk, gudunk through the giant pothole, it just sort of like moves a little bit and just wobbles a little bit because the pothole was filled in roughly. But it's not ultimately healed or fixed. And that's what the dissociative process does. It makes it easier for us to keep driving our car along. It makes it easier for us to just like keep going and like make it through the day. But it doesn't help us start pulling on that thread and identify where the trigger's coming from. Anyway, that's a little tangent about dissociation, but the point is like the triggers in general um, are going to have this bodily element that we're going to feel. I mean, even ones that we're dissociating from are going to manifest somewhere in our body. So here's what we have. We have the bodily element coming through the heart chakra. If you feel tension and pain in the heart, stress in the heart, a stabbing sensation in the heart, if everything gets tight and constricted, okay, that is going on here. And then you have a mental picture. Both of these happen simultaneously. So start training your observational eye. Start training yourself to look for that, okay? And what it would mean is like, hmm, at the same time that my heart area gets sticky and tense and I feel uncomfortable, I also get this belief system coming in where it's like, oh God, like this isn't good. It could be, let's say, I'll give a couple little examples here. Let's say you're walking in public, you have social anxiety, you have to go into the supermarket and you need to ask for help to help find a product. And you're not in the mood to do this. You just don't want to interact with people right now. So you have to go in there, and then the person who's working there that you need to talk to is kind of not being very friendly, and you start asking someone in this person in the store to help you out, and you start getting this tightness in your heart at the same time that this little thought process goes saying, why do I have to be here? I don't want to do this. This person's being an asshole. I don't want to even be relating to them. I just want to get the hell out of here now. And this would be the two components here of this social anxiety. Another example could just be, let's do something where you're totally alone. You're completely alone. Maybe you're getting ready for bed and you don't even know why, but all of a sudden you start getting ready for bed, you're brushing your teeth, you get this tightness in your heart area, and at the same time, this belief system starts saying, oh God, I don't want to get up in the morning. It's gonna suck when my alarm goes off at 7 o'clock. God, can I call in sick? No, I can't. Oh, I don't want to be there. God, I don't want to get up. Okay. And you don't even know why. 5 minutes ago, you were feeling okay. You start brushing your teeth and it starts. Now, what does it look like to start? I should just go into this for a quick second. What does it look like to start the actual process of investigating why did brushing your teeth just trigger that, right? Like, what was it about brushing your teeth? The answer could be that you literally have a repressed memory to do with getting ready for bed and brushing your teeth that was fairly traumatic. It could be a bit more general than that, that just this routine of getting ready for bed tends to remind you of things that are unpleasant, tends to remind you of the fact that you're going to be waking up in only like, like 8 hours and you really don't want to think about that. Or it could be something else altogether. I mean, there's so many things it could be. So, the best thing to do, in my opinion, if you've been able to identify this kind of a trigger, is simply to know that it's there. You could write it down. If you have time to sit quietly with yourself, take a few deep breaths and simply make yourself a blank canvas and say, okay, I'm allowing myself to feel triggered right now. What's coming up? And you can write down what you see, what you hear, what you feel, what you think. Just get it out there and then go on and try not to overthink it for the time being, but just make note of the fact that here's a trigger. You don't really know what it means. And then hopefully you'll have further opportunities to try to figure out what that's all about. Um, and again, it's a long process, and you can pay someone who's very skilled, in a variety of modalities, any kind of a therapy or a healer who can help you with that, or you can find techniques on your own to try to work with some of your triggers. And um, it's kind of like detective work, honestly. But let's come back now to really what this is all about. So that would be an example. These are examples of getting triggered and how you feel actual tension in your heart chakra in this area of your body, and at the same time, a mental story starts. Making that connection is very, very powerful. It's actually really easy for people not to do this. It's very easy to just see one component. Probably the easiest thing is when you just see the belief system and you say, oh, I'm getting down on myself right now. I'm getting depressed. I'm getting anxious, whatever it is. And then you just make note of that piece. But the problem if you just do that is it quickly becomes kind of an intellectual thing, and you can get very analytic about it. Problem is our mental body and our mental systems are some of the last to actually essentially be manifested. If you have something that is the ultimate source and the ultimate cause of a trigger, it works its way through emotional issues, through the body, through physical issues. It works its way through your actual temporal manifestation of the things that are going to be happening to you in your life, the people you'll meet, the experiences you'll have through law of attraction, as it's called. Different experiences and events will literally be drawn into your timeline. And then there's going to be like the mental process, which is in many ways the least reliable, unfortunately. And this is someone who is I'm someone who's like in general in my life, I've been very intellectual and very analytical. I'm moving away from that now. And it's been like really tough for me because I just thought for so long that my mental processes were reliable in the sense that like I could almost like solve my shit and I could solve what was going on with myself. And it was very, very humbling in the last probably 3 to 5 years for me to realize that it's not possible. And really only in the last 6 to 12 months has this really become clear to me. It is simply not possible because the mental processes are completely unreliable. They're very easily tampered with, um, both by your own innate self-defense mechanisms as a human being, the ways in which we keep ourselves safe, inner child stories, past life stories, um, anything going on with you. We have ways to keep ourselves feeling safe and ways to keep ourselves feeling like we can proceed and actually live life and make it to the end of the day. And those processes create all kinds of mental stories about what's happening to us that frankly have no basis in reality. They're literally survival tools. And then if you want to look at the other part of the picture, which would be attachments and entities, um, aspects of energy in this very chaotic energy world that's like a billiard table, and there's literally energies, collective energies, um, entities, beings that we cannot see with the physical eye in general, colliding everywhere. And for various reasons, they can get attached to us and stay there for years. And so, this is just another reason why looking too closely at your mental story and then putting credence in that, um, it can be a mistake because if you're at the point spiritually where you're ready to dig deep, if you start feeling something and you say, "Oh, this belief system, this thought that's coming up, I'm just gonna like put my faith in it right now, and I'm gonna assume it's true," which most of us do without even thinking. We don't realize we've already chosen to believe the mental story. Remember what I was saying about our mental focus and our mental consciousness, being able to understand where that focus is? We don't even realize we've already made the choice to buy into the mental story, but we have. And so that narrative can be faulty and unreliable and unrealistic for all these reasons I'm giving, okay? And that's why if you only have that piece, it's really hard to kind of get your bearings, which is why a variety of different kinds of therapy and different approaches to healing, both from the alternative and even some conventional, honestly, conventional psychology and stuff, are very focused on. I mean, you may have heard the word somatics and all kinds of um, somatic. I don't even remember all the terms, but what's it called? Somatic. The really popular. I forget what it's somatic. Somatic technique. There's many different somatic techniques. Peter Levine is someone in terms of the trauma research who became very famous for looking at the the somatic aspect of the trauma, which is literally where it is in the body, and then doing release work focused on that. Anyway, so we add that piece in, and then what happens is we have this belief system piece that I was talking about, and then you understand, oh, it's actually in the body. And if you want to think about it as cause and effects, that can be quite helpful. You simply say like something's stuck in my body, in my heart chakra. I don't know what it is. It's there, and it's pushing, like literally, it's in your heart, and then it's pushing some kind of an energy straight up. So it's coming here first. It's in the heart first, and then it gets to the head. Okay? The head is just trying to make sense of it and giving you mental images, pictures, thoughts, ideas, words, beliefs, and narratives. But it started here. Something's literally trapped in here. So, what you do when you are able to recognize, aha, I have both of these happening at once. I have the heat in my heart, and then I also have the mental story. This is when you realize that you have kind of a multifaceted, multidimensional problem. And that's really great because once you've realized that, you can pull back, try to take a bird's eye view, and become a bit more impartial. So you don't necessarily want to jump right into the weeds and try to like hunt around what's going on? What's going on with me? Why am I feeling this way? What the hell's happening? No. If you can do it, you pull back and you say, oh, okay, I have something that's lodged inside my energy system that's literally causing phenomena on the level of my nervous system that I'm interpreting and I'm feeling as pinching and pain and tension, and something's literally stuck in here. And then I'm also getting this mental story about what's happening, you know? And then you see that it's going on. And then that gives you the opportunity later on to actually do your detective work through whatever approach works best for you, or whichever combination of approaches. Okay, so this took a little while to get into, but I really wanted to talk about this. I think this aspect of living in your heart is almost more literal, because what you're saying is you understand the importance of the heart chakra to the human energy system. When you live in your heart in terms of this, you remember to gently bring your focus away from the mental story of what's happening to you and put it instead into the actual feeling. Okay. And to close on this, imagine that we're just kids. Like imagine a child who's out in the cold and who's like sledding, and they were out sledding alone in the snow, and then they fall off the sled and they get hurt. And for a couple minutes, they're actually really in pain, and there's some pain that gets in their system because they hit themselves in the snow, and they're probably honestly maybe they're feeling lonely, and all of a sudden they're afraid because they don't know where their parents are. They're just a little kid out sledding alone. And in that moment, if you were to like take a cross section of that kid's mental body, I mean, you could see any number of beliefs and thoughts. You could see on the one hand, like, I'm going to die. If the kid all of a sudden gets a terror or a fear of death based on this, I'm going to die. I'm never going to be found. What if I freeze to death out here? Maybe they hurt their leg, and they're having trouble walking. All of a sudden, the belief system becomes, I'm not going to be able to get back home. I'm not going to be able to walk. This is terrible. Maybe they're going to think mommy and daddy, or my mom or my big brother should be out here helping me out. My big brother was supposed to come sledding, but he didn't want to come at the last minute. I hate my brother because he's not here. These would be like really negative, dark beliefs. But then you could go into positive beliefs that are false positive beliefs, in the sense of like, this is actually possible too. It could be beliefs along the line of like, wait a sec, now I'm going to be okay. Because I mean, this obviously depends on the age of the child. It depends on many factors of the temperament of the kid. But you could have someone who would be like, what if I could fly? And this would be dissociative, and they start getting into this belief where, on some level, they start imagining, what if I could fly myself back home, even though I just hurt my leg sledding? What if I could literally grow wings and fly back home? Oh my gosh, that would be so cool. And so they snap out of reality by literally imagining themselves flying back home. And that's how they cope with whatever different kinds of pain they're feeling in the present, right? Or it could be like, um, oh, the fact that I hurt myself means that maybe I won't have to go to school tomorrow because I'm gonna have to stay in bed and heal now because I hurt myself sledding. So this is really great. I won't have to, go to school. which on the one hand we could look at as kind of funny, but on the other hand, like there's a good chance that if a child very quickly and instinctively goes into that kind of a belief, it's not just funny that the kid is thinking about how to play hooky, but it's actually a kind of troubling, because there's a good chance in a case like that that the reason that would happen is not because they hate school necessarily, but because they're again dissociating from some aspect of the pain, the feeling of being alone, or whatever else is going on in their domestic life at home, where they feel that they can't quite count on their parents or their family unit to kind of like help them in a very critical situation. Or maybe there's something at school that has just come up because of this incident, and in reality they find the experience of going to school kind of traumatic in some. I mean, there's so many. Look, this is just a little sneak peek at this. There's so many possibilities here. I'm just describing all the ways in which, boom, there was a physical issue that happened. The kid was sledding and got hurt, and then immediately the belief systems start. So if we were to sit down and like write out whatever that kid is thinking in that moment, would we would we think we'd be able to say like, oh yeah, that represents reality? Probably not. We would say that represents the psyche of this, not even the whole body of this child's, not even, definitely not their higher self, not even their entire consciousness. We would say this is simply a mental story that's been generated by this very incredible and sophisticated human mind that is trying to cope. That's what's happening right now. Okay. This is not really realistic. Um, and the fact is, this kind of process actually continues into adulthood. Like there's almost no change. This is how we continue to be. If anything, a change that happens in adulthood is we have a more advanced rational side in like the frontal cortex, and we start thinking. This is where it gets dangerous. We start telling ourselves and thinking that we're grown up and we're adults. So the thoughts that come into our head are realistic and do represent reality. And that's not true. So it actually can be very sneaky to identify when triggers are causing false beliefs, because we tend to assume that that's not an issue for adult people, that adult people are rooted enough in reality that whatever mental process is happening is something that we can look at directly, and we can take it on board. And that even applies to mental processes that this is kind of delicate. This is a nuanced thing to explain, but that even would apply to mental processes that we tend to think are unrealistic. Here's what I want to say. Like, sorry, even if we think that a mental process or a belief system that has come up, even if as adults, even if we tend to think that like, oh, I can see it's wrong, what we would normally do is then we simply go to the opposite of that and we say like, oh, maybe that's the truth. But what I'm trying to say here is that, did you notice like these examples I was giving you about the kid who was sledding? Some of the places where that chain reaction went were to mental processes that almost had nothing to do with the original event. Like if the king had wing, or if the kid all of a sudden had wings, or if they start thinking about school and how great they don't have to go to school, or whatever else it could be. It's like it quickly becomes divorced from the actual event. When these things get compounded and compounded over time, and you have like different traumas or distressing events that get added up onto others, you can have a situation when all this kind of stacks on top of it through the very labyrinthine mechanism of the mind, where the trauma trigger and the belief system by the time we're adults are like 10 miles apart. And so it's not even about sledding anymore. It would literally be like, let's go back to someone who's brushing their teeth at night. That might, on a very, very subconscious level, remind them of what it was like when they would have to brush their teeth with one of their parents when they were a kid, and that parent used to be really unsafe and kind of a very controlling, manipulative parent, or there's something that didn't work out very well, and then it triggers them because reminds them of brushing their teeth with a parent who was kind of an asshole or a dick or something, but then that compounds it into like certain other times where they then said they don't want to brush their teeth anymore, but then they ended up having a couple cavities, And then they got in huge trouble, and their mom was really mad because they got these cavities, and she said, "You need to be brushing your teeth more." And then the fact that they got the cavities meant that they were no longer allowed to eat candy. Their mom got really crazy and said, "You don't get to eat candy for a whole year because of these cavities." And then they didn't eat candy, and so then they were forced to eat salad. I don't. This is getting ridiculous, but they were put on some crazy diet about salad or something, and then they grew to hate salad. But then they met this one friend who really loves salad, and they made this friend when they were in fifth grade who was a vegetarian, and so they would eat salads together. And so then it made them feel a little bit better about the situation because they had a friend that they liked eating salad with. Maybe this isn't the best example, but things like this will actually happen. These weird chain reactions, they don't have to be like event by event. They can be a little more nebulous than this, but brushing your teeth might all of a sudden create a chain reaction where you feel each of these emotions that are really buried and suppressed way, way down inside of us. And then all of a sudden we have this connection with brushing our teeth and feeling unsafe, feeling that we're getting in trouble, and then feeling that it affects our diet and how we look at food. Anyway, like I said, that example was a little long-winded, but I just wanted to kind of try to explain here how like this sense of pain and discomfort inside of us ultimately creates belief systems here that can literally have nothing to do with the original problem. So like, you know, we can feel uncomfortable throughout the day when we get triggered by things, and then a thought can come up, and it could be like, oh gosh, like I'm really worthless. I'm no good at this. I'm no good at my work. I'm no good at relationships. I always get yelled at by my partner. Whatever it is, that can like trigger us and trigger us. But the thing is, like, it might not be as because some of the spirituality out there would basically tell you like almost just like turn that frown upside down, in the sense of like if you're having negative self-talk, the answer is that you need to find a way to have positive self-talk. But the problem with that is like, especially if there's any relation to trauma or there's any relation to something stored in the body, the problem with that is that it's ignoring the fact that there's actually a chain reaction that's happening that's taking you to that point. And so the if you really notice that, like the times when that story comes up about being worthless, sort of a shame story, the time when the shame story comes up might actually be far worse and triggered by certain places you are, certain things that you're doing. And if you can't make that connection, especially rooted in the body, and if you don't see that and observe it, you're going to be basically on a wild goose chase, and you're not going to get that that's what's going on. I mean, you're going to try to say, well, wait a sec, I'm going to tell myself to be more positive now. But the fact of the matter is, if this is triggered by certain times throughout the day, that might, this is what I'm saying. Like, if it's an issue of like getting in an argument with your partner and that really bothers you, but it could happen that some of the time when you're really upset about your relationship, it's when you're not even with the person in your relationship. It could be when you're by yourself and then you get triggered some other way, but it actually ends up that your mind is replaying a belief system about the relationship, um, that's coming from some latent period of childhood or something that got implanted in there so long ago. Anyway, like, it's really important to start looking at all this. And even though this got kind of muddled up a little bit, I think that's important because it is a giant muddle, and it's good if you can see that. The connection between the original stuff that really hurt us and then the belief systems in the head is a very long and messy connection. And you don't actually have to, it's not like a puzzle where you have to solve it. But what you really should do is understand that there's a body connection to all of this. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to find the most important emotional stuckness, the most important emotional pain. Okay. Because if you can get to the deepest root, then you can release the whole thing. You don't have to like make some giant, dissertation on every emotional trigger you have. Right. So this is all this aspect of living in the heart that has to do with feeling what's happening in your heart center. You live there, not in the mental process. When the mental process starts up, you jump out of that and say, wait a sec, what am I feeling in my body at the same time? What am I feeling? You know? If you can't feel anything at all, that could be a numbness, that could be a sign, but oftentimes there is a feeling somewhere in your body. Okay? Putting it all together, then, living in your heart is really about being able to love. And this was the first definition I gave, being able to love even when the going gets rough, being able to allow love to be the container for all of our situations, whether they're easy or difficult, and saying that I'm approaching this with love, even though I'm freaking at my wits' end and I'm so mad, even though I'm really sad and depressed right now, I'm still approaching this with love. Okay. And then the second way is to say, I'm living in my heart. And so I'm going to understand that what's happening in my body is actually a sign that I don't have all the answers to what happened and what caused myself to feel this way. I don't know why this is causing such disruption in the physical vessel. And what that does is it sobers you up. So instead of thinking like I know what my problem is, I just have to do XYZ. I spent 10 minutes trying to give a couple examples to try to help you guys understand that it's not that simple. If you just like take whatever the thought process is and try to just like, I'll just do the opposite and everything will be okay. That's probably not going to work. So instead, what you do is you sober yourself up by saying, I don't know what's going on. Okay. And that's the second piece of remembering the body component to show you that there was a pain and a trauma that got lodged inside you. Okay. And if you can key into that energy and open up a spirit of, my intention is to figure out where that energy is coming from, that's a much faster and more holistic and loving way to approach your healing journey. So I really hope that this was interesting to you. I covered quite a lot of stuff. Living in the heart is a really big topic. This is what I've discovered on my journey, that there's a couple different aspects to living in the heart. And generally what happens, which is what a lot of the great spiritual traditions show, is that the importance of the mind goes down, the importance of the heart goes up. And that's not because the mind isn't important, it really is, but you understand more and more that it's a tool. And so every time we engage with the mind as an analytical tool, we do so consciously rather than doing so out of a place of instinct or even fear. Instead, we pay attention to this heart of ours that is, in a way, actually much more intelligent. It has a much greater scope in what it can see. And this is where a lot of the greatest pains and blocks are stored anyway. So I hope everybody has a great day, and I'll catch you next time.